Hello, and a very warm welcome to Sunday with Niall Paterson. A parliamentary recess is usually a time for we politics watchers to catch our breath and take stock, to content ourselves with nothing more exciting than Twitter pictures of MPs back in their constituencies, cutting ribbons and pointing at potholes. Not so this week. The sexual abuse scandal in the charity sector deepened. Theresa May and Boris Johnson began to very lightly sketch out the government's road to Brexit. And there's been a dash of Cold War intrigue in the mix as well. Was Jeremy Corbyn an accidental Soviet spy? Well, perhaps not a question we'll get to the bottom of this morning, but we'll do our very best with the rest. So I'll be joined today by the Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Yvette Cooper, to talk about the government's readiness for Brexit and her uncommon this week. I'll be speaking to the man with the toughest job in politics, persuading students to turn their back on Jeremy Corbyn and get behind Theresa May, the Universities Minister Sam Gyimah. And after yet another day of high drama, perhaps high farce in UKIP, we have the first interview with their new interim leader, Gerard Batten. But first, Theresa May's government is facing up to some, well, but few are bigger than the housing crisis. New figures this week show the collapse in home ownership among the young and Conservative MPs are increasingly jittery that the difficulty getting on the ladder is driving a whole generation into the arms of Jeremy Corbyn. But does the Labour Party really have the answer? Let's find out. I'm joined now by the Shadow Housing Secretary, John Healy. Lovely to see you, Mr Healy. Very good morning to you. No, I'm sorry, but before we delve into your brief, I really do have to ask you a couple of questions. About Brendan Cox, of course, the husband of your colleague Jo. What do you make of his decision to resign after an admission of what is quite clearly very serious impropriety?
He's clearly done the right thing, and I'm sure he and the rest of us don't want his position and this to get in the way of the really good work that is being done by those two charities in Jo's memory, both here and in the wider world.
In terms of the allegations about Oxfam, which in part is the reason why there has been so much interest in Brendan Cox, of course, there are a number of those allegations are no longer allegations. They've admitted them. Do you get the impression that Oxfam is taking this as seriously as they should?
Yes, I think they are now. There are questions about whether they may have done so in the past. There are questions over whether the Charity Commission has taken this seriously enough in the past. And this is clearly not confined to Oxfam. And is certainly getting in the way of the really important great aid work that is done across the board in some of the most chaotic countries. But this type of abuse in the most chaotic circumstances with the most vulnerable people is just stomach churning. So I think our calls, and I think now accepted by the International Affairs Select Committee in the Commons for a wide-ranging inquiry, I think is part of the next step that needs to be taken.
I mean, you described it there as abuse, and many people would agree for you, but Labour, I'll submit, hasn't exactly been taking the lead in this argument, and some have suggested that part of the reason for that may well be, Jeremy Corbyn has in the past called for prostitution to be decriminalised. Now, the situation in Haiti, people are clear that that was an abuse of power. But where does that line begin? At what point does it cease to be a consensual transaction between adults and become an abuse of power?
No, of course it was an abuse of power, it was an abuse of position, it was an abuse of privilege for these third world vulnerable people to be exploited by first world aid workers. I completely contest the idea that somehow Labour's been quiet on this. Our shadow spokespersons made a number of statements. We were one of the first to call for a Commons inquiry into this, and that's absolutely necessary, not just into the scale of this, but the causes of such abuse. And I think also the steps that now need to be taken, not just in making sure this never happens again, but also in setting up some sort of register that keeps these organisations up to the mark and prevents anyone who's done this before being rehired in other countries to abuse again.
And many people would support that. Let's turn to your brief now, sure. Housing. And of course, I mean, homelessness is a blight on all of us. But do you believe that it can never be completely eradicated?
Yes. It's not just a blight. I think it shames us all. In a country as decent and well off as ours, there is no reason why people are sleeping on the streets, in shop doorways, in car parks, for want of a roof over their heads. We saw an unprecedented decline under Labour up to 2010. It's risen every year since then. And the big tragedy here is we know what works because we've done it before, and that's what now needs to happen. And I guess not just the stark figures of a relentless rise in homelessness, but the tragic death of a man on the doorstep of Westminster during the week, I hope will be a wake-up call for Westminster. But sadly, it won't surprise many of the frontline workers that do see this week in, week out.
I just want to deal, though, with a couple of the kind of more eye-catching proposals which Labour has put forward in terms of dealing with the crisis in the housing sector, and crisis that there clearly is. I mean, compulsory purchase, the seizing of land by the state for the purposes of building. Now, you've said that unlike the current system, whereby you pay the value as determined after that land has been developed, you would only pay the undeveloped price, which is a tiny fraction. In what way is that fair to the landowners?
We're looking at this sort of idea and many more at the moment, because what's clear is that we have a failure on housing on all fronts, and we need action on all fronts.
But in what way is it fair, though?
Well, on this specific idea, I think this is common sense, and there's a degree of cross-party interest. It's what we've done before. It's how we built after the Second World War. New towns like Harlow and Crawley and Stevenage. And the principle that when somebody is a landowner, and it is agricultural land, just because a public policy decision to planning permission can increase the value of that land 100-fold, that sort of profiteering at the moment is going to the landowners, the land agents and some of the big developers. And our argument is the public and the community should share that for the hospitals, the schools, the roads and the affordable housing that's needed as part of any development.
But what the data shows is that actually it's the small landowners that will be hit the most because they don't have the funds to launch the necessary legal challenges. It's pension funds that invest heavily in capital in land that will be hit by this.
Not so, no. I mean, most of the profiteering is landowners and land agents. I'd like to see pension funds and institutional investors putting more into the sort of long-term investment that good, affordable housing developments can bring. You start to solve the housing crisis, and you give long-term investments for the pension fund members as well. But you know, if you sit on a piece of land not much bigger than a football pitch, and it's worth £20,000 when you're farming it, and you get a planning permission from some public agency for development, and it's £2 million, you know, some of that uplift should be available and should be used to fund the homes that we need and for the benefit of local people in the community. And I think it will be part of the way that we start to deal with an understandable resistance you often find at any new development, because people generally don't think whatever's built, that's not going to be for me and my family.
I just want to touch on rent controls, and it's another policy which seems to have split opinion. You've got organisations like Shelter saying, in fact, actually what you could see is this leading to higher levels of homelessness. I mean, how does a cap on the interest serve to improve the situation for the majority of people in the rental market?
Again, this is in many ways common sense. It's done in other countries. You have exactly these sorts of restraints on the free market in other markets.
But it does nothing to do with the underlying problem, the fundamental unaffordability of property.
No, it's part of the answer. It's part of the answer because you know, we don't have the basic rights as private renters in this country that we have in other markets. Now, the idea of longer-term tenancies as the norm, with a control on the rises during that tenancy, seems to me common sense and certainly would help many private renters, especially young people. That the report you mentioned out this week demonstrates that they're having to pay a great deal of money in private rent. They can't save up for the deposit, increasingly being locked out of the housing market.
But aren't you just driving landlords out of the rental market? And in fact, all that benefits are the people that are able to gather the deposit to buy a house, which, as we know, is incredibly difficult at the moment.
No, I don't believe landlords will be driven out of the market. I understand why they want to see more detail. They may be resistant to that.
They're very concerned about it.
But do you know the best landlords offer longer tenancies? The best landlords offer a guarantee of restrictions in rent rises during that period. There's no reason why we shouldn't be bringing the standard of the rest up to the best.
Who's setting housing policy at the moment? Your momentum. I mean, the people of Haringey would perhaps suggest that it might be the latter. Me, Jeremy Corbyn, and the process that we've got within the party. So why were the democratically elected councillors of that area not allowed to proceed with a vehicle, controversial to some, admittedly, but one which would have provided, you know, nigh on 6,500 new homes?
The decision for that regeneration scheme is in the hands of the councillors elected to that council.
There's no direction from the NEC?
Elected to that council and accountable to the people who elect them. What Sadiq Khan, Jeremy Corbyn and I have said, under a Labour government, when you get big regeneration schemes like that, they need to go to a ballot. They need to be able to demonstrate the support of the people most affected, which in principle is hard to argue against. And it would be part of a package that we would bring in with new funding, new powers, new flexibilities for councils to strike much better deals than perhaps some are doing at the moment.
Well, there's certainly 6,500 homes that are not going to be built as a result of all this. I just want to change tack slightly in all of this. Jeremy Corbyn, do you think he'd make a good spy?
I've absolutely no idea, but I mean, ridiculous. I don't think you'd ever make a good spy. I mean, what a ridiculous story.
Well, but isn't there a simple way that you can put it to bed? You know, the Stasi have a file on him, which, with his permission, could be released into the public domain. Why doesn't he just put it out there?
I mean, this is a ridiculous story. I can't believe a serious journalist and programme like you is taking this seriously.
I don't know. I'm sorry. I think it's serious. The former head of MI6, Sir Richard Dearlove, thinks it's serious. He points out that Jeremy Corbyn would not pass the security vetting for MI6 or MI5, and yet he's asking to become Prime Minister. No, I'm sorry, I think there is something significant about it.
I've never seen you with a bigger smile on your face. For the record, it's wrong, it's false, it's ridiculous. It dates to a period in the more than 30 years ago, and even the Czech head of the Security Services Archives has said in the Telegraph today, it's rubbish.
But why on earth was he, at that point, meeting with a Czech diplomat? And everyone knew what that meant at the time. You know, that Czechoslovakia, at that point, was locking up and worse, dissidents left, right and centre. Why was a member of the British Parliament meeting with them?
Diplomats, part of their job, and part of the job of policymakers and journalists, is to have those sort of conversations, to get the briefings, do the visits to embassies. That happens all the time, right across the political spectrum and right across the ages. I mean, this is trying to make something out of nothing in order probably to distract by what I would argue is a crisis we have in the government. We have a Prime Minister too weak to be able to negotiate a good deal for Britain on Brexit, too weak to keep the warring factions in her own cabinet in line, and too weak even to get her MPs to vote for her policies in Parliament, which is why Labour is now winning the arguments and forcing changes in government policy on everything from housing to university tuition fees now.
John Healy, many thanks for being with us. Now, you may well have noticed that an earthquake hit the United Kingdom yesterday, shaking the very foundations of the nation. No, not the dismissal of Henry Bolton as UKIP leader, but an actual seismic event that rattled windows across Wales and the west of England. Many dubbed it underwhelming. Certainly not an accusation that could be levelled at the toppling of the UKIP leader yesterday, with the lurid accusations about lawsuits and love affairs taking over the reins of the party. As interim leader is Gerard Batten, who joins me now from East London. Mr Batten, very good morning to you. So long, Henry Bolton. We hardly knew ye. Good riddance to bad rubbish.
No, I wouldn't put it that way. Good morning, Niall, by the way. No, I wouldn't put it that way. We all had high hopes that Henry was going to do a good job. We all supported him as long as possible. Unfortunately, his position became untenable, and it would have been much better if he'd have accepted that at the end of January and gone, but he didn't. But we are now pleased that the party's reached this decision, and we wish Henry well in whatever he chooses to do next in his life, and good luck to him.
And so, as so often appears to be the case these days, the question is who will lead the party next? I mean, Mr Bolton hasn't ruled out standing. I mean, do you think that's a good idea? Will you be standing?
Well, I don't think it would be a good idea because I don't think he's going to get very far. He got 29% last time of the vote, and I don't think he'd get anywhere near that next time. He may well be free to do that under the rules, and if he wants to waste his money and be a contender, then that's up to him if he wants to give it another go. But I think he would be much better advised to draw a line under this and get on with enjoying the rest of his life doing something else.
What about you, then?
I've been given the job as interim leader. My job is to try and stabilise things now and get it back on track and do the very urgent things that need to be done. I haven't made a decision about whether I go for it full time or not. I'm going to wait and see how things go on. I've never had any I don't have any ambitions to be leader. I could have run on the previous occasions, but much preferred to support other people. So I will wait and see how things go. I've only stepped up to do this in order to help the party which I believe in and the cause which I believe in, and I'm going to see how things go over the next few weeks and months.
Yeah, but here's the thing. I mean, you're the 7th leader of UKIP in 18 months since the vote to leave the European Union. I mean, isn't the truth of the matter that UKIP is now an irrelevance, a joke, and not a particularly funny one at that?
Well, UKIP has achieved something marvellous in the last 25 years. There was no opposition to the European Union. In that space of time, we've managed to secure the referendum, and we managed to win the referendum and get the result. And Brexit isn't delivered yet, and our political establishment are doing everything they can to actually not deliver it, or in their view, the very best that they can come up with is a withdrawal agreement where we leave in name but not in reality. And UKIP still has a very big role to play in making sure that we hold the government to account and talk about Brexit. And I want to get immediately back on that. That's our #1 priority, so that we actually get what we voted for and we don't allow it to be betrayed. And there are lots of other issues where UKIP can stand up for policies that represent ordinary people, and that's the kind of course that I want to lay out for us in the coming months.
Isn't the problem you face pretty much the same as other UKIP leaders, that actually, whilst you want to get on to the matter of talking about policy, there is other stuff around, you know, Henry Bolton and his, you know, checkered relationship history. With you, it's comments that you've made time and time again about Islam. I mean, I just want to ask, I mean, do you still believe that no new mosques should be built in Britain?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that last bit. The sound isn't very good. Can you just repeat
Sorry,
that?
yeah. Do you still believe that no new mosques should be built in this country?
Well, it's interesting, isn't it, that Islam doesn't allow a Christian church or a Sikh temple or a Buddhist temple to be built in its heartland because it's forbidden in the Quran. And yet we are supposed to be fully,
but this isn't exactly the heartland of
tolerant
Christianity,
of them building
Mr.
things here. So what I would say, I mean, that might be my personal opinion. Policy-wise, what I would certainly want UKIP to do is to adopt a policy that says that no foreign money should be allowed to fund extremist mosques and imams, which is what we've allowed Saudi Arabia and Pakistan to do over decades, and why we have such a problem with literalist and radical and extremist Islam in our countries now, is because it's actually financially supported and exported to us by those types of countries. They've exported their ideology to us, and we have to think that we're powerless to do anything about it. Well, I don't think we are, and I think we should do something about it.
OK, so you do still believe that no new mosques should be built in Britain. Do you still believe that all Muslims should sign a Charter of Understanding, a code of conduct which demands that they renounce violence and certain passages from the Quran?
Well, this is very interesting. Thank you for asking me about it, and I thought you might do that, and I've got the little offending piece of paper here. Some years ago, I commissioned a document from a former Sharia lawyer who rejected Islam to actually lay out all of the texts in the Quran which allow people to justify violence and extremism. And what we did at the end of that document, which was my idea, I didn't write the document, this was my idea, was a little affirmation in which we asked people to actually reject those texts, those violent texts, those extremist texts. And let me tell you 5 little points we asked them to accept. The equality of all human beings before the law, equal rights for women in principle and practice, the rejection of coercion and intimidation and violence in the name of religion, religious freedom from persecution, and tolerance of other religions and their beliefs, and rejection of religious teachings that discriminate against others on the basis of their religious beliefs. Now, they are things which are inimitable to a literalist, radical interpretation of Islamic text, and I don't think it's unreasonable to think that people who come and live in our country should reject these dark age ideologies which many of them bring with them. And we can see the problems that are existing in countries like France, Sweden, Italy and the UK, precisely because Western governments haven't addressed these problems.
OK, so you do still think the Muslims should sign this Charter of Understanding? I mean, on that point, well, I mean, there's some fairly heinous stuff in the Old Testament. I mean, it's been a while since I've been at Sunday school, and of course the programme means that I can't go anymore. But, you know, Leviticus is full of things that, frankly, would lead to Christians being forced to sign a Charter of Understanding by your logic.
Well, what we did is we invited people to reject those texts and to accept those principles, which I think any reasonable person in a Western liberal democracy would accept, equality of people, etc. They're the ones with the ideology. They're the ones with the problem, because it's their extremist ideology. Kill infidels wherever you find them, make war on infidels, strike terror into the hearts of infidels. That's their ideology, so they're the ones that have to address it and start actually understanding the problems that have been brought into our country. It isn't us who created the problems, we've allowed it to happen, but it is an ideological problem, and the only people that can address that are the people that are supposed to support and follow that ideology, and I hope that more and more of them will reject it and integrate into our Western liberal democracy, where we have things like tolerance and acceptance.
I mean, you keep talking about they and them, and I'm not entirely sure to whom you're referring. So, I mean, just one simple, straightforward question. Do you still believe that the 3 million British Muslims are adherents of a religion that, quotes, is a death cult born and steeped in 1,400 years of violence and bloodshed that propagates itself by intimidation, violence and conquest? I mean, you wrote that on your blog after the Westminster attack. It's still there this morning. Do you believe that 3 million British Muslims are adherents of a death cult?
I believe what I wrote there about Islam is factually and historically true, and anybody that cares to look at the history of Islam over the last 1,400 years will see that that is true. It was propagated by invasion, by violence and intimidation, and if you look at every continent in the world where you have the Islamic beliefs, then you have violence. And if it glorifies death, they believe in propagating their religion by killing other people and martyring themselves and going and getting their 72 virgins. Not all of them. That's not saying that all of them do believe that or do that. I'm saying that a significant minority believe that, and they are the problem. But the trouble is they are justified in those beliefs by a literalist interpretation of their own so-called holy texts. And
I mean,
I don't think it helps anybody.
You didn't use the phrase significant minority
problems
on your blog. You just said, Islam is a death cult. I mean, here's the thing. David Cameron once described your party as a bunch of fruitcakes, loonies and closet racists. He was being generous, wasn't he?
Well, he's free to say that because we live in a free country. Nobody wants to go and blow him up or cut his head off because he said nasty things about other people. It's a free country, we have the right of opinion. And I'm expressing my opinion, and I think you'll find that a lot of people who listen to what I say and have read what I have written will actually agree with it. And what I'm hoping is that a lot of people who nominally follow the Islamic religion will actually understand that the problem lies with their ideology, and they can actually make the necessary adjustments to integrate into our Western liberal tolerant society, which is what we all want to live in. We all don't want to go in fear of terrorist attacks or violence or intimidation by people who follow a particular ideological belief. Who wants to live in that kind of society? I certainly don't, and I doubt that you do either.
Niall Paterson, thanks very much for joining us in the programme. Appreciate it. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll be speaking to the Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, Yvette Cooper.
Wouldn't life be so much easier if you could control your blinds at the touch of a button? With Ultra Smart Blinds from Appeal, there's no chains, cords or wiring, because these stylish blinds are driven by a rechargeable power pack. There's a host of smart options too, including automatic timers, light and temperature sensitive controls. Everything, in fact, to get your shading just the way you like it. New Ultra Smart Blinds from Appeal, the intelligent solution for home shading.
Oh, look at those two, having a laugh and getting on. They never get on. It's priceless. No, really it is. Because she came free. That means a free suntan, free splashing. Even that laugh didn't cost a penny.
Free child places. Plus, book now with just a £60 deposit. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. At all protected.
Please listen to Dana's story.
شافهم بس قصفوا طيران ورعب وخوف وروس بالأراضي.
Dana was forced to flee Syria with her children. She survived a boat crossing, kidnapping, 4 days lost without food or water. Now she has nothing. Dana isn't just another faceless refugee. She's a human being and a mother. How can we hear her story and do nothing? Text CARE to 82010 and give £5 to CARE International. Caring for refugees is what CARE does. With clean clothes, hot meals, soap. Little human touches that mean so much when you've lost everything. So please, text CARE to 82010 now. Thank you.
Welcome back. I'm joined now by Yvette Cooper, Chair of the Home Affairs Select Committee, a very busy woman these days. Very good morning to you, Ms Cooper. Your committee's been pretty damning about the Home Office plans for EU citizen registration. Two systems that they want to put in place, one for those already here, one for those who arrive after March 2019. You say it can't be done.
We don't think they've got time now to get two different systems in place because there's just been so many delays. The immigration white paper's been delayed again. We haven't got the clarity about what these systems are going to do, and also not enough resources in terms of people in place and, you know, the delays with the IT systems and so on as well. So, look, that's our concern. If we don't have more details, more answers about how this system should work, then it is really difficult for the immigration staff, for the border staff, to actually get these things in place in practice. And if you can't get it working properly, it's a mess for everyone. But
just to be clear, you're certainly not, as part of this, making a value judgment on the government's position of treating some EU citizens in one way and others, those who arrive after exit, in a different way.
Well, we didn't look at the desirability of the policies. We thought we would just look at the practical implications. Can they deliver things in time? And the problem is, at the moment, different ministers are saying different things. So both the Brexit Secretary and the Home Secretary have implied that there will be the same arrangements for those arriving after Brexit Day as those arriving before, those in the transition compared to those before, those who are here already and people who are here and working here. But then the Prime Minister has said, no, the arrangements are going to be completely different. And we still don't know which it is. We do understand some of this will only be finalised during the negotiations on the transition deal. However, we don't even know what the government intends to get out of the negotiations, what they're trying to get and what their objectives are. So we want them to tell us, we want them to set out exactly what they want the plans to be during the transition period, and then to set out how it's going to be delivered and to put more resources into it.
I mean, as you mentioned, that white paper on our post-Brexit immigration system has been a while in the making. I mean, what does that represent? Problems with designing such a system? Or do the problems in part perhaps stem from the indecision that we're seeing around the Cabinet table?
Well, it looks to me as though there is just a lack of agreement in the Cabinet and also a lack of decision. I understand why they're not setting out the long-term framework on immigration, because we're all waiting for evidence from the Migration Advisory Committee, which is due in the autumn. But the short term, what happens this year, what happens next year, what happens the year after, they really have to tell us. And it's irresponsible, frankly, not to do so. It's uncertainty for EU citizens, uncertainty for employers, but also just makes life impossible for the staff who have to deliver things. I think they just keep kicking the can down the road because they can't decide what they think the objectives should be. And Parliament, as a result, having no opportunity to debate it and work out whether we're getting this right.
But didn't we learn anything from the speeches from Theresa May, from Boris Johnson this week? I mean, let's take Mr Johnson first. I mean, you've said a number of things, including, to be honest, given everything he said about the bus, I don't see why we're taking him seriously at all. And you also tweeted this, which is interesting. Waffly, bumbling, empty speech confirms my view. Why on earth is anyone taking this man seriously? I mean, did you not learn anything from Mr Johnson's speech?
No, only that he's gone round and round in circles and not made any progress at all. And look, there's a sort of formal response, which is, where's the detail? You know, this long, we've only got 13 months left until Brexit Day, and we've still got no practical details. It's still just the same, frankly, waffly, vague stuff, and that is irresponsible. But there's another thing here, which is, I do think you should show respect for people in politics. There's lots of people I strongly disagree with, including the Prime Minister, who I show respect for. But the thing about Boris Johnson, I just think he's a joke. He embarrasses us here and abroad, and he makes things up for his own personal gain. And that's why I just don't think we should be taking him seriously at all. If the Prime Minister didn't take him seriously as well, actually the government might be in a better state.
I mean, some people would suggest that there's a similar degree of waffle when it comes to Labour's own position on Brexit. I mean, should we be seeking membership of the single market? Should we retain our position in the customs union?
I think the customs union is particularly important. So the Labour Party said that we should be in both the single market and the customs union during the transition. I think that's right. But I would go further in what happens after the transition, because from manufacturing areas, if you care about manufacturing and distribution across this country, Yorkshire, the North and the Midlands, actually we need that customs union. The idea that you would impose customs checks on our manufacturers, I think, will cause big problems.
So why is the leadership not being clear about it then?
Well, I hope it will. I hope that that's something
tens of thousands of people are writing to the party. Tens of thousands of members are writing to the party asking for more on the single market membership.
I understand that the Shadow Cabinet, I think, are meeting tomorrow. I hope that this is exactly what they'll look at. I hope they will say, look, we need a customs union. And I think there's really strong support for this across Parliament as well. We're going to be holding a briefing that Nicky Morgan, as Treasury Select Committee Chair, and I are going to be hosting on Wednesday for the CBI, talking to MPs about what it means for constituencies across the country in terms of the customs union as well.
As someone with such a long association with the Labour Party, I wonder what you made of events yesterday at the National Policy Forum, where we saw the chair of the NEC, in essence, manhandle someone away from the podium because, despite a majority of the people in that room wanting the election of the chair of the NPF, the NEC decided against it.
Well, I wasn't there. But I was troubled by some of the reports that we saw. I think, look, the Labour Party has always been a broad church and must continue to be so. We're also always a party that I believe would show respect for those who are chairing robust meetings, that should always make sure that every voice is heard, that we have proper processes for internal elections. And I think no one ever wants to see one faction try to silence others or for things to be handled in the way that they appear to have been yesterday. So
you used the word
I think
faction
it's really
there.
important.
I mean, do you see it as factionalism within the party?
I think that we don't want that. And the reason that we don't want any of that kind of internal argy-bargy to end up distorting what we do is because for all of us, our purpose is to stand up for people right across the country who want a Labour government, who need the work that Jeremy Corbyn's been doing across the country to be taken forward. And we should be pulling together and making sure that we're standing up for people across the country and not just navel-gazing and looking inwards at ourselves.
Now, we spoke to your colleague John Healy about this just a few minutes ago, but I wanted to ask you as well. Brendan Cox and his resignation from the charities he's represented. What do you make of his decision? I mean, it's pretty clear he has admitted to a serious amount of impropriety.
Well, I think, like John, I think that he has done the right thing, and I've seen his statement where he talks about taking responsibility and about the inappropriate behaviour. So I think that, yes, he has done the right thing. Look, there is a wider issue here, because obviously I don't know the detail in individual cases. There's a wider issue here that I think, hopefully, we are seeing a change now in the climate and in culture, where people are recognising that, you know, those in positions of power should not abuse positions of power. Those who end up becoming the victims of harassment should have support to speak out, and there should be systems in place that allow this to be dealt with and sorted out and not allow things to just drag on and continue to cause real problems.
We can only hope. Yvette Cooper, lovely to see you. Thanks for coming in. After the break, we will, of course, be taking a look at the Sunday papers.
Ooh, they've doubled up. Just like these double data SIM-only deals from Tesco Mobile. Now get a 1 GB SIM-only deal for £7.50 a month with 250 minutes and 5,000 texts. Or this 6 GB SIM-only deal with 1,500 minutes and 5,000 texts for just £12.50 a month. How's that for a dynamic duo? Just two of the great deals available now. Smile. You're on Tesco Mobile.
Hey You is here.
Kardashians and Housewives. What more could you ask for?
Yeah. Over 150 reality shows with loads of episodes same day as the US.
Bethany Frankel's new show is everything.
What could be better than that?
Revenge Body. She's totally the motivation that I need.
I'm helping others transform and shut down the shamers.
Download your favourites and watch on the go.
On my iPad, on my iPhone.
Hey You saves my commute every time.
Hey You, reality on demand. Get the app to start your 30-day free trial.
This is it, Cooker Flex, the first boiling water tap with a flexible pull-out hose. Interested? For an introductory offer, go to cooker.co.uk.
Hi.
Oh, what on earth are you doing here?
I couldn't stop thinking about you.
Well, actually, we haven't been able to stop thinking about you either.
Really?
Yes, I love your staircase.
Yeah, and just that balcony. It's beautiful.
Can we meet again sometime, maybe?
Oh, well, I'm afraid we've called Sarah, the agent, and we've made an offer already.
Oh, OK.
On you, actually.
Me?
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
Well, yes, it'd be nice if you'd have us.
Then yes, I would, I do.
When it comes to relationships, our 150 years experience helps everything run smoothly. Savills, what can we do for you?
Time is running out to get both Oleg's BB-8 Toy plus 2-for-1 cinema tickets only when you buy circumferzamarket.com. Star Wars The Last Jedi in cinemas now.
Watch very carefully.
Some people still believe magic is real.
I want to see for myself.
Do you want to bring it here, yeah?
I just don't see the point in conflict. Pretend I didn't hear that.
I am Rome, and where I walk is Rome.
Now it's a war.
Oops. My theory is that you're a bad man pretending to be an idiot, whereas she thinks you're merely an idiot.
It's time to experience the Jason Bourne story.
I'm on my own side now.
There's always an objective, always a target.
That's Jason Bourne. I remember.
Follow Matt Damon from the beginning to the end. The Bourne Collection, this weekend on Sky Cinema.
Welcome back. Let's take a look at what's leading the Sunday papers. Starting with the Mail on Sunday, it leads the tearful confession of Brendan Cox, the widower of the murdered MP Joe Cox. Mr Cox has resigned from 2 charities amidst allegations of sexual harassment. An investigation by The Observer has revealed that 68% of Britain's prisons are providing unsatisfactory standards, while 2 in 5 are deemed to be unacceptably unsafe. Science and humanities students at universities could be charged different tuition fees to ensure value for money. That's according to the Education Secretary, Damien Hines, speaking to the Sunday Times. The Sunday Telegraph leads on that claim by a former Czechoslovak spy that 15 Labour MPs, including Jeremy Corbyn and John McDonnell, shared information with Eastern Bloc countries during the Cold War. And the Sunday Express reports on Theresa May's insistence that there will be no second EU referendum. Joining me to discuss all that, the former Deputy Chair of UKIP, Suzanne Evans, the businesswoman and Managing Director of PetXI, Fleur Sexton, and the co-founder of the anti-Brexit campaign, Our Future, Our Choice, Femi Oluwole. Lovely to see you all this morning. Let's get straight on in, and Suzanne, strangely enough, we're going to talk UKIP.
I had to talk about this, didn't I? We had a lovely day in Birmingham yesterday that a lot of us would rather not have been there. I really wish Henry Bolton had resigned. I predicted right from the start that he was going to lose this vote of no confidence, and sure enough, it happened yesterday. But we had to go through this expensive rigmarole where we all had to pile to Birmingham. And so now I'm afraid UKIP is going to be looking for yet another leader. I think we've had 7 since the EU referendum, since Nigel Farage stood down. So what's going to happen next? Well, Nigel Farage has shown himself to be singularly useless when it comes to choosing leaders of UKIP apart from himself. He chose Diane James, who didn't last 2 weeks. He chose Paul Nuttall, and he chose Henry Bolton. So I think it's time for either Nigel to come back, because he might not be very good at choosing subsequent leaders, but he's a pretty good leader himself, and I think he could really improve our poll ratings again. So I think he either needs to come back or keep out of the next leadership vote.
So are you, I don't know. I mean, I have to ask the question. Are you going to run?
Well, I might very well. Yeah, let's see. As I say, I think Nigel helped sort of create this mess in a way, so it'd be quite nice if he came back and sorted it out, because we do know that Nigel is absolutely capable of getting enthusing voters to the point of getting at least 12.5% in the polls, which is what we got at the general election in 2015. And I think this government does need a bit of an impetus and a push to try and get on with Brexit and get a proper, clean Brexit. And I think Nigel Farage back at the helm of UKIP could be that. But end this dance of the seven veils, Nigel. Will you, won't you, might do, I might not. You know, just either come back and lead us or get out of the way and let somebody else get on with the job.
I mean, Fleur, from your perspective, what's the role of UKIP, given that actually they got the EU referendum, they won the EU referendum? I mean, what's left to do?
Well, I think it's about providing an alternative view, and I think it's very important that people are given choice. Very, very important that people see a wide spectrum of opportunities and different things that can happen within a community, because at the end of the day, my interest in particular is getting young people to have excellent skills, both for the economy to be strong and also for the community to be strong. So I think choice is very, very important. And what really comes across for me in all of this is that leaders have to serve. Yeah. So I think the focus for the new leader has got to definitely be on somebody who can serve. Yeah. Definitely.
Absolutely. I mean, Femi, you're all for a plurality of voices in the political sphere, aren't you? Oh, no, you're wearing a I don't want Brexit T-shirt.
Yeah, well, on UKIP, I'm actually really grateful to them. Not for the musical chairs with the leadership, but that's just a bit of fun. But just for how they've made people like for the job of people like me so much easier. I mean, if you take the things they said before the referendum and the things they've said after the referendum, for example, you had Nigel Farage who said there is nothing we can do to stop unlimited numbers of EU migrants coming here and enjoying the same rights and privileges as all the rest of us. And then after the referendum, in a conversation he had with me, where I pointed out that under EU law, if you can't come here without a job unless you have enough money to not become a burden and have medical insurance, you can't be a burden on the NHS, he said, in theory, Femi, you're right. In theory, under European treaties, there are restrictions that can be placed. So they've made it so much easier for people like me to say, hang on, you were sold this, you were told that it's the EU's fault that we have unrestricted immigration, and in fact it's the UK government's fault. And they've made it so much easier for me to say, hang on, maybe we should think again. Maybe we should have a say on our future. Maybe we should take back control of this process.
Fleur, I want to actually go to your story next, in the Sunday Times. And this is a hunt for the missing children. These are children that are being homeschooled.
Yes, that's right. So there are 45,000 young people who are being homeschooled, but they've done a survey of 188 councils, and it actually looks more like there's about 80,000 young people who are being homeschooled. Now, I think this is excellent that there's the opportunity of homeschooling, because it's all about parental choice. It's very important in life that young people have good choices, and I think young people can actually find lots of different paths to where they need to be and fulfilling their potential. The thing that they're concerned about, the reason they've got this bill that they're trying to put through, is because some of these young people have never been on any sort of list, so they're unknown to the local authorities. That's the key thing.
I mean, that's the thing. I mean, just looking at the article here, Suzanne, I mean, it is entirely unacceptable that local authorities do not know how many children are being homeschooled. I mean, councils say 45,000. Home education groups say that, what, the best part of 100?
80,100. I find this really shocking, that children who have never gone to school are not counted in these statistics. That is horrific. We have a situation where, in theory, there are children in this country that we have no idea whether they're being educated or not, no idea whether they're having the opportunities that every child should have in this country, and we don't know about them. I certainly wouldn't want to see the UK go the same way as some other countries in Europe, Germany, Sweden, Greece, Holland, where homeschooling is illegal. I think that's the wrong way. I think parents need to be able to have that choice. But yeah, I think an annual checkup and for all children to be registered, I don't think that's at all unreasonable. My concern, if anything, is the resources of local authorities to be able to take on these additional powers. We know their budgets are being cut to the bone. I have some concerns about that. But for goodness sake, to protect our children, we need to know what's happening to them.
I mean, Femi, if we don't know how many children are being homeschooled, how certain can we be that they're receiving an appropriate, decent education?
We can't be. I mean, I believe that it's every parent's right to choose whether or not they take their child to school or whether or not they want to homeschool them. But they're missing out on a lot of social interaction and a lot of skills that they should be developing in school. And I actually agree with you, Ms. Evans. It's important to make sure that communities put the resources in to make sure we know where these children are, we know they're getting a decent education. It's just so vital.
Well, let's turn then to your story in The Observer, and it's to deal with the launch tomorrow of this review of the financing of university education. Their take on it is that cutting tuition fees would be a subsidy to Tory voters.
Well, right now we have a situation where UK students have the highest student fees of any country in the world. We actually exceeded America, which I didn't think was possible. It's those from the poorest families, the lowest income backgrounds, that actually end up with more debt, because those from richer families simply pay off their student loans. Given that most people from low-income families never actually pay off their student loans, cutting the cap on tuition fees from 9,000 to 6,000 after they tripled it before, that just means that richer families will have less to pay. It only benefits the richer families, and yet once again, the Tories are screwing over young people. I mean, it's all about their next steps. If you're finishing school, you want to know that your next steps are going to be secure. You want to know that you're going to be able to find a job. You want to know that you're going to have uni places. And they're pursuing Brexit, knowing that it's going exactly against the wishes of young people, which is going to make those next steps a hell of a lot harder. If you want a decent job, you need to have an economy that's thriving, that's producing the opportunities for those jobs. And that's why I created Our Future, Our Choice, because young people are the most affected by this. I mean,
Suzanne, just on that, I mean, there is a logical point that is being made by Femi and others, that because they're going to be around for a lot longer than you and I, they have more of a stake in this. I mean, what do you make of that?
Well, I loathe tuition fees. I went to university, I got a full grant. I would never have gone to university had I not had that, because my family couldn't afford it. I was the first person in my family to go to university, and so I benefited from that education. I now have a daughter who's in a very different boat indeed, and she's just started to pay back her student loan because she's just got over that threshold, so that's loads of her income out the door straight away. UKIP's view is very much that we should abolish tuition fees. We'd like to abolish them altogether, and we think that's financially possible, but certainly for science, technology, education, medicine and maths, all those subjects that we really need people to get on board with and skills that we're short of. But I also think universities got to be more responsible. It's this one-size-fits-all. They all charge the same amount of money, but with very, very different outcomes. I'd like to see a league table of university outcomes published, so students have the ability to judge whether a course is going to get them a decent job or not, and in what timescale. I think that's fair. They're charging lots of money. They should be accountable just like any businesses.
Guys, I am really sorry. We have run out of time. We will have to leave it there. Suzanne, Fleur, Femi, thank you all so much for being with us. Appreciate it. Stick with us. Appropriately enough, after the break, we'll be speaking to the Universities Minister, Sam Gyimah.
Must be cool, you know, having siblings from exotic places.
3 are adopted. 1's mine. No, they're all mine. And now I see what any fool can see.
Family is this great experiment.
Here and Now, brand new drama, starts Tuesday at 9 on Sky Atlantic.
Oh, yes. We all want this again. This sunshine, this service, this all-inclusive. That's why I've already booked next year for just £60, so we can enjoy it all again. And the same goes for this beer.
Get ahead and book with just a £60 deposit. Jet2 Holidays. Package holidays you can trust. At all protected.
I'd been shopping and wasn't feeling well.
I had a sore arm, so I went to A&E.
It was a spinal infection.
It was sepsis.
I'd gone
blind.
I thought my life was over. Then I got my guide dog and my life changed. Now I run a drop-in centre and I love it.
Now I miss working and helping people, and I hate it. Please sponsor a puppy and change a life like mine.
From just £1 a week, you'll get regular pup dates, a cuddly toy and photos as your puppy grows into a guide dog, just like my Trinity.
just call 0300 555 5500 or text LIFE to 83010. I'll never get my sight back, but with a guide dog, I could get my life back.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You haven't seen the sun in like forever, so you search for a beach holiday. Sunny beaches, sandy beaches, big beaches, small beaches, until you're lost, searching for surfing dogs. But then you find Home Away, and they search millions of homes to find you the perfect beach villa, where you all find your own rooms and a barbecue bigger than your kitchen at home. And you find that watching the love of your life teach the kids how to dive warms your heart even more than the sun. From villas to cottages to apartments, find homes that match you at Home Away.
Welcome back. It is an unenviable task. Persuade the nation's students that Jeremy Corbyn, the man who promises to scrap fees entirely, is not the answer and that they should take a look at Theresa May instead. But that's the job that was handed to my next guest in the latest reshuffle. Joining me now from Westminster, the Universities Minister, Sam Gyimah. Mr Gyimah, very good to see you. We will move on to your brief in just a moment, but I wonder, whilst we have you, Brendan Cox, you will be aware that he has resigned from the charities he represents following his admission of improper conduct. What do you make of that?
Well, I haven't followed the story in detail, but I've just seen the front page of the Mail on Sunday today, and of course, I think it's a very sorry situation for the family, given what has happened. My comments really would relate more to the charity sector in general, that they should all remember what their mission is, and their mission is to help people who are often suffering. And what I want to see is better safeguarding and higher standards of professional conduct across the charity sector.
But the reason there's been so much interest in those allegations is in part, of course, due to his high profile. But it's also due to those revelations about Oxfam staff. I mean, do you get the impression they understand the gravity of their situation?
Well, I hope they do. I hope they do. I just feel that in the case of Oxfam, maybe it's become too big, too entitled, and in some cases, not all cases, the sense of mission has been lost. And I think that's something that they need to rediscover. Certainly, if taxpayer money is going to be supporting them, it's been good to see Penny Mordaunt, the Secretary of State for International Development, write to all of them about their safeguarding processes. And they've got to clean the stables, and they've got to do it quickly.
But those comments from Mark Goldring, the Oxfam chief, babies in their cots, well, I mean, that is something, I suppose. I'm glad to hear it. But remarks like that don't exactly scream that they're taking this seriously.
Well, I hope that the public reaction to his comments about what is shocking and disgraceful behaviour that has been revealed at Oxfam would show him that he got that seriously wrong. He shouldn't have made those comments, and he should focus on cleaning the stables. Of course, Oxfam does tremendously good work, but it is important that they are above in terms of our suspicion in this area.
Let's move on to your brief then, shall we? And having sorted out the crisis in the prison service, you're now turning your attention to higher education. There's a review of the way it's financed to be unveiled this week. What do you hope to achieve?
Well, there is a review of post-18 education. So it's not just higher education finance. That will be one part of the review. There are two reasons why we're having the review. The first is, if you look at the current system, which has delivered in many ways. Today, we are a global superpower in higher education. We've got 4 out of 10 of our universities, 4 of our universities in the top 10 in the world, 16 in the top 100, second only to the United States, which has 5 times our population. And we have more disadvantaged people going to university than ever before. So the current system has delivered, but we want a review on it, because if you look at how it's operating, there are 500,000 students that go to university every year, but the offer for most of them is pretty similar, which is 3 years on-campus degree, often costing about £9,000. I would want to see more variety and more diversity in the market, because I bet you of those 500,000 students, most of them have different needs, different aspirations. university
Absolutely,
education.
Mr. Juma, but clearly the biggest concern for students or potential students these days is the affordability of it all. I mean, can we just dwell on a couple of the specifics which will be covered in the review, but which you will no doubt have a view on? Interest rates on loans are, you know, pretty demonstrably extortionate. RPI plus 3%. I mean, that's ridiculous, isn't it?
Well, the review will look at all aspects of the student finance system. As you know, you don't call a review and then prejudge what the review is going to look at. These are tough issues to resolve. They require some very tough trade-offs. And that is why you need a review to look at the evidence dispassionately, especially as we also want to preserve the really good bits of the current system, which I've outlined, which is more money going to universities and more disadvantaged people's going in.
But it's not just the rate of interest, it's the fact that the interest starts accumulating from the moment you start your course. I mean, you haven't even done your final exam, taken down your Che Guevara poster and packed up your countdown teapot, and already you owe £6,000 in terms of interest. That's unacceptable, surely.
But you've got to look at the system in the round. So, you know, for some people, the rate of interest, for others is the headline fee, for others it might be our maintenance loans. But also we've always got to remember that we've got a system here as from 1st of April. You do not pay a penny unless you're earning £25,000 or more. After 30 years, the debt is wiped off. However much you've managed to pay off by then. It hasn't deterred students from going to university. You've got more disadvantage, but overall, more students going to university than ever before, which is a myth that has been perpetuated that somehow the financing system is acting as a brake on students realizing their aspirations. But the way into this is to say, how do we make sure that there is sufficient variety in the course offer, whether it's commuter courses where you can stay at home and study, sandwich courses that allow you to intersperse work experience with your degree, and all of these different degree apprenticeships, so that actually people can pick the right course for them in terms of their aspirations and their circumstances.
But, Mr. Jim, isn't the biggest problem that you have with expanding Conservative appeal with younger voters is that the paucity of the policy programme that you're putting forward when set against that from the Labour Party? I mean, you talk, the most eye-catching policy you've had thus far is freezing fees at £9,250. Labour is saying they will get rid of them. So, I mean, here's your chance. What? Look down the barrel of the camera, address young people, and tell them why the demographic most resistant to voting Conservative should do so.
Well, firstly, we haven't just frozen fees. As I said, we've raised the threshold of repayment from £21,000 to £25,000. So as of 1st of April, you'd only start paying if you're earning over £25,000. But I'll look down the barrel of the camera and I'll tell you about Corbyn's offer. If it is free, it means numbers are capped, and by definition, education is exclusive. Everywhere in the world, we know, every system in the world where university is free, you cap the numbers, and that means it benefits the well-off, not the many. That is not what we are about as Conservatives. We do not want to put limits on aspiration. We want universities to be engines of social mobility. That is why we will look at a system that works for everyone.
Mr. Jim,
every opposition in this country has made unsustainable promises, and that's what Corbyn is doing.
I'm so sorry, we have to leave it there. We are running out of time. Thanks very much for being with us. I will be live on Facebook in about half an hour to answer your questions. We will, of course, be back next Sunday, but you can find me at Sky News Neil on Twitter anytime.
Hello.
Hi. What are you doing here?
Well, it's just that this nice man came round and stuck this sign up outside.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all right.
About
it's
that.
all right. We just... What? We really want a larger kitchen and a conservatory. So that's it then, you're leaving? It'll be fine. You'll find someone else.
Now that's a fine-looking house.
When it comes to relationships, our 150 years experience helps everything run smoothly. Savills, what can we do for you?
Ground in dust and dirt doesn't wait for the big weekly clean, so grab the only cord-free vacuum with the Dyson digital motor that has powerful suction to clean deep, anywhere, anytime, by anyone. Buy direct from Dyson and get cord-free power from only $199, including free next-day delivery.
When you need some emergency cash, for that, you can turn to Sunny. They don't charge fees at all. What you pay is crystal clear. That's life support. Swing by their site. Stress not.
Loans from £100 to £2,500 at sunny.co.uk.
Experience more of everything on a Colette worldwide holiday. Choose from over 160 worldwide itineraries tailored just the way you want. Travel across entire countries, visit stunning cities, and experience intriguing local culture. Led by our expert tour managers, our holidays include everything from hotels, excursions and flights to private airport transfers. Call 0800 804 8360 or go online today to request your free brochure. Colette, see more, do more and experience more. At all protected.
Police emergency, go ahead, caller.
We've got someone that's been stabbed in the chest.
Someone holding his chest by the looks of it.
Look like me.
Do you know who it was?
I heard a scream and then I heard a loud bang inside the house.
1552, we'll travel.
Don't open that door.
It's emergency?
Yeah, I'd like to report an assault, please.
Who's been assaulted?
Me.
Call me. Get in, sit down.
Under pressure like never before, The Force Northeast starts tonight at 10 on Pig.